Back in the course project, as always, if you didn't follow along, you can find the project attached to this lecture. And I want to get started with the M language now. And for that, we go back to our query editor here. In the query editor, I want to go to our dim H query here. I mentioned it, it can take a while to load this information. You know how this game works in the meanwhile. So this is our well-known information here, and in the right part you know the applied steps. So all the changes, all the functions we used to derive our final data here. I also mentioned this formula bar earlier in the course, and in this formula bar you can see the logic behind these steps, because as for example, when changing the type, we can just go to transform and then change the data type here. So we have a very user-friendly user interface in Power BI Desktop, which means we don't have to write any code or the language itself. We can just click around and tell Power BI Desktop what it should do. But behind the scenes, this happened here, at least with the last step. You can see that we formatted the H category here as text. You can also click right here, for example, to expand that a bit in case you have a larger step here. Not the case for us. However, in the home ribbon here, if you go back, you can also find this advanced editor. This is this option here. In here, you can find not only the last step, so if I put this down a bit, you can see the last step here, change type to. This is the step we can see in our formula bar, but you can see all the steps. So these applied steps here translated into what? Well, into the code in M language. So this is this M language part I was talking about. I mentioned this because you have to understand that behind all these steps there is a certain logic, and that's the logic of the M language in case of the query editor. Now, the cool thing is that we can also add such M language steps on our own. For this, we can close this advanced editor here. And now, if we go to add column again, we know this conditional column feature, index column and duplicate column, but we also have this custom column here. Let's create one. And now this new menu opens, and here we can first give this column a name, and I will call it M-test, because it will be a test of the M language. And here we can now add a custom column formula. This means a formula which refers to the different columns that we have in our data here. And if we put it down a bit again, I can now type my code, so to say, right here. But again, Power BI Desktop makes things a bit easier for us, because in the right part here, we have our available columns. And if we now, for example, say we want to combine two columns, not questioning whether this makes a lot of sense here, so we could say we want to combine the age group and the corresponding age category in a new column. Then we can click here and now select the age group and say insert. So we have this one here. And then we can do the same thing with the age category and insert it right there. With that, we now created a new column and we use this M language, so we referred to the columns with the code in the end. And with that, we can create a new column. I want to add something specific here, and this is just 2 times an and now these quotation marks and a space. Without diving too deep, this will just add a space between the age group and the age category. Otherwise, both will be connected without any gap between. So if we confirm this now and wait until this reloads, and we have this new column, no big surprise here. However, if you closely inspect the formula bar now, you see that, well, we can find parts of the steps we applied, so this age group and age category combination part. But if you look at the entire formula, you see that the M language or Power BI Desktop automatically applied this table function to add the column and so on. So it's important to understand that although we wrote the M language code partially on our own, we again got some assistance from Power BI Desktop. However, let's keep this in mind for the moment, and let's now switch to the data model and see how we can do the same steps, so how we can create this new column with the DAX language. So we go to the home ribbon here and press close and apply. Now we have some pending changes as our dim age table was updated with the new column. Therefore, the changes have to be applied to our data model here. And this took quite a while, but we are back now in our data model, and now we go to the data view. And here we select the dim age table, and hope that it reloads. If you can't see anything, I told you this already in the course, you can just click onto one of the columns, then the data should be displayed. And we can of course see our test column that we just created in the query editor. Now we selected an individual column, but actually I want to add a column to an existing table. Therefore, we don't need the column tools, but the table tools, these ones. In these table tools, we have that calculations part, and there we have the new column option. This is the one we need right here. And now we see some interesting things. The first thing is that we don't have any kind of pop-up as we had it in the query editor when we wanted to add that new column. Here we just have the formula bar, which can now be edited here, and we'll do that in a few seconds. You also see that newly created column right here with empty values, of course, at the moment. And you also see that column here in the fields area. So with the new column, a new field was generated or created, and we can interact with this field now. Let's first start with that formula bar part right here, because here we can, of course, give this column or this field in the end a new name. Let's maybe call it DAX test to be in line with our mtest column here. And now, as we don't have any kind of help, we have to write our entire DAX code on our own. There is no support from Power BI Desktop integrated here. We will dive into the specific syntax of the DAX language in the next lecture. For the moment, I want to show you two ways on how to achieve the same result that we just saw in the query editor. So we want to combine age group and age category. The first approach is actually similar to the one we saw in the query editor. So I want to refer to a specific column, and I can do this by adding square brackets right here. And in this menu, I can now navigate with the upper and lower keys on the keyboard. And here I can navigate to the age group and press tab. With this, we selected our first column, and now we can also add and, as we did it before, the quotation marks, a space, another quotation mark, and another and sign. So this will just add the space between our two column names in the end. And now I want to refer to the second column. So I again add square brackets right here. And now refer to the age category, which is already selected, press tab. And now if I press enter, well, you see, we created exactly the same result. The formula bar is gone though. We can get it back if we select the field right here or if we select the column. And this is actually the same logic, the same code we wrote in the query editor. However, keep in mind that in the query editor, we just saw the minified version of the code, you could say. We had that help from the query editor, but when we had a look at the formula bar, you saw that the actual M code looked a lot different here. But this is pure DAX code already. However, there is a second approach to solve this problem, and this approach is even more related to the DAX language as we use specific DAX language features or functions. Therefore, let's get rid of this part of the code now. And now I want to use a so-called function. A function is a specific code that can be executed, which contains, well, specific features. In our case, I need a function which allows me to combine two different columns or text in general. This function is called concatenate. So if you enter CON right here, you see that Power BI Desktop also comes with some support in the data model. This is the support we get right here. You get an overview of the functions available in the DAX language. We want to have concatenate, so we can select tab. And now we have to enter two different parameters, text1 and text2. A text can either be, well, text we enter manually with quotation marks here, or we can refer to columns which contain text, data formatted as text. In our case, this is true for our age groups right here. So let's select these and press tab. Now we enter a comma, and now the second parameter in our case will be our age categories. So we again need square brackets here and select the age category. If we now close the parentheses and press enter, you see we again get almost the result we had before. What was missing though is the space in between our age group and the age category. To add this, we can use a feature named nesting. We can nest different functions here in the DAX language. Because you saw that here in concatenate, we only had the option to enter two different parameters. In our case, age group and age category. But if I get rid of the age category now, and again enter CON, then press tab, This allows us to enter two parameters again, because we have the age group now in our first concatenate function, and then as the second parameter, we have another concatenate function, which again contains two parameters. So the first parameter here is now not a reference to a column, but simple a quotation mark, a space, because this will add that space we need, and another quotation mark. Now a comma, and now we again refer to our age category here. Now it's important to close the bracket, so 2 times here, because we have the first concatenate function and the second one. And with enter, we can see we achieved the final result, the desired result that we wanted here. So this was our first comparison of the M language and the DAX language, and what is the conclusion now? It's important to understand both languages in general. However, as you saw that we get lots of support from Power BI Desktop in the query editor when it comes to the M language, we basically created our entire dataset without writing any kind of M code. Well, we're good to go without any deeper knowledge of this stage, at least when you're getting started with Power BI Desktop. For the DAX language, this looks a lot different. Here, we have to understand the language. We have to know its syntax. We have to know what functions we have and how we can use these functions according to our needs. Therefore, we will focus on to the DAX language now, and I'll also give you a quick introduction into the DAX basics. With these basics, you will then be able to further dive into your own DAX areas of interest and safely navigate through this interesting language. So with that, let's dive deeper into the DAX language now.